Welcome back to another episode of the Employee to Boss podcast. I'm your host, Haley Hayhurst. I want to start off this episode by saying I have a new podcast logo. So I'm sure when you came to listen to the episode, you saw that, and very excited. Probably in the next few weeks, I'll have an episode about rebranding, how to rebrand your podcast, why you should do all those things. Because honestly, your podcast grows with you as you grow your business or your life or whatever it is. So you don't always have to keep what you started with. You can always adapt. Eventually I'll probably have new podcast music. My logo just changed. The name will always stay the same. The mission and all of that will stay the same. But the look of it, the aesthetics, that can all change. And so when you want to start a podcast, definitely don't let these small things hold you back, because you can change these at any point and it's not going to be a major change in your business. So now let's get into the episode. This week, I'm speaking with my friend Valerie Moses. Valerie is the founder of the Wellness Wanderlust brand, which is a podcast and a blog focused on demystifying wellness trends and sharing practical tips for creating your best life. She began her career in community engagement and public relations in 2013 after receiving a bachelor's degree from the University of Central Florida, where she later earned her MBA. So this episode is really interesting because typically on the show, I talk to people about how they became their own boss from corporate. But as Valerie explains in this, she enjoys corporate life and she's not looking to get out of it anytime soon. But she has this brand on the side to really keep up with her creative passions, really flex that entrepreneurial muscle. And I think that's really cool. And that's why I invited her on today. We have been connected for probably a year and a half so far, and we talk often. We've really developed a good relationship with each other, and I just had to have her on because I love the way she talks. Honestly, her podcast is one of those that I listen to weekly, and as a podcast producer, having multiple clients and listening to all of their episodes, a podcast really has to stand out for me to want to listen to another one. So the Wellness Wanderlust podcast is one of those. So in this episode, we talk about how she balances corporate and her own business. She also has a sponsor for her podcast, so we talk about them and how she got that sponsor. And we also talk about just claiming her space in the health, travel, and lifestyle industry and how she stands out, because those are three industries that there's a lot of congestion in. There's a lot of people who jump into travel blogging or health blogging, lifestyle blogging. We see all of these things. So we talk about how she actually built her brand to stand out. So let's get right into this episode with my friend Valerie Moses. Valerie, welcome to the Employee to Boss podcast. I love talking to you, so I can't wait for this conversation to start.
I'm so excited to talk with you too. Our episode together just aired on my show, and I feel so lucky we get to talk again.
Yes, it's been so fun knowing you. I feel like we met probably in like the very beginning of my business, close to a year and a half ago, I think. Maybe 2 years ago. It's been a while.
Yeah, it really has. The time flies.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. And I think we connected when I was doing a bunch of podcast audits. And so I audited your podcast, and then we just became friends after that.
Yeah, I think that's what's so cool with, with the internet today, with social media, the way we can connect. And, I definitely benefited a lot from doing the podcast audit. And then it's been so cool getting to see your business grow, getting to grow my show, and take a lot of the tips that you gave me to kind of start shaping the way I market and the way that my show has gone. So it's been really fun to do this journey kind of alongside you.
Yeah, and your podcast is one of those that I listen to very regularly, and so It's amazing. I love it. So if you want to start with
You.
telling us about yourself, your business, your podcast, everything we need to know about Valerie.
Absolutely. So, my name is Valerie. I work full time in public relations and community engagement for a credit union in Central Florida. I grew up in South Florida, moved up to the Orlando area about 10 or 12 years ago now for college, which I feel like I am so young. How could it possibly be that many years? But here we are. And I stayed in the area. I studied advertising and public relations, started working for the credit union right after graduation, and I've been there ever since. But I also was blogging when I was in college too. And from the blog, I transitioned first like pop culture, college advice. I would write about Audrey Hepburn movies, really just about anything that I was interested in, sometimes Jersey Shore. So it was a very interesting combination.
I love that.
And yeah, you come from the pro wrestling podcast, so you kind of get it that, we can be so many different things and have so many different interests. And so it was a really, really eclectic blog, and kind of started to tailor it when I was in grad school as I was starting to experience some of the autoimmune issues, wasn't really sure kind of where to go and how to deal with those. And so many of the bloggers and influencers out there, they had really great advice, but it was tailored to people that had infinite hours in the day, it felt like. And so how do we do it when we're trying to go to school, when we're working, when we're maybe trying to, handle a second business, a side hustle? How does that work? And so really kind of starting to grow that, it developed into a podcast. And today I'm the host of the Wellness Wanderlust podcast, which will be about 2 years old in mid-September. So by the time this airs, we're about, celebrating our, not terrible twos.
That's awesome. I love that because, when we start, I'm reading this book right now about how to, make it through a recession. And I think it's cool because you always have this side hustle, this blog, this brand to lean back on if anything is to happen, with your full-time career. And I just think it's so important to balance the two and actually have the two. So, I work with a few people who don't make money from their podcasts, but they have it just as this passion project. But if anything was to happen, you could make money from your podcast. And I think that's awesome. But you just brought on your first sponsor, correct?
I did.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That's been so fun. And that's been a really cool thing with that too, is that while I am working full time, I'm not looking to leave corporate America just yet. And I do enjoy corporate America. I also, I do love the idea that it's there. It's something that I could grow over time. And I'm interested in so many different things. I have a little bit of that squirrel brain where I think that there's, more of a future to the business. I do a little bit of freelance writing as part of it as well. And it was something that, I was doing it sort of for fun and for a little extra cash, and realized, hey, if something were to happen, if I were to lose my job, or if I were to just maybe have to go on leave where I wasn't able to be paid for a certain amount of time, is it going to sustain me forever? I would probably need to up my game a little bit more, but it's something that would help, and it would be something I could expand and grow upon, if that were something that were to happen. So I love that that's there, but it's also just such a passion, and it helps me develop skills that I use in my full-time position, and skills that help me, I think, just to be a better friend and a better human in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I love this because everyone I've really talked to on this podcast are, part-time in their corporate job, full-time in their entrepreneurial job, or full-time as an entrepreneur. But I really think it's important to talk about like corporate America. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I think when we surround ourselves in this space with other entrepreneurs, there's kind of like the shame we might feel of like, oh, I'm in corporate and this is my side hustle. But I was on a podcast like a year ago, and this quote has stuck with me this whole time. It's something like, when you are an entrepreneur, everyone else around you is an entrepreneur. And so you feel that pressure, you feel like you're not enough, and you feel like, you can't get to the top. But when you look outside of your realm, not everyone is an entrepreneur. Yeah. And the fact that you have this side hustle, this passion project, is so amazing, but we always look at it with like closed eyes, with like blinders, and we're like, oh, but all these other people are like doing all this. But
Mhm.
yeah, that quote has just it's been in here for a minute.
It's so funny you mentioned that too. I remember back in, maybe about 2015, 2016, I made friends with someone who was on Shark Tank. He had this amazing business that he was starting from the ground up, and it had really, really taken off. And he was getting a lot of media attention. And it was a new friend of mine. And when I went to a party at his house, every single person there seemed to have this really cool business that was doing all of these amazing things. And they, I felt a little bit of that shame, a little bit of that imposter syndrome. Like, who am I around all of these creative minds and all of that? Not really realizing A, I get to be creative in two different places, and B, the friend that I came to the party with is an economist and works full time in that type of position for a company. I cannot tell you what an economist does. That is definitely not my specialty, but it sounds really great. And he has skills and knowledge that I don't have. I have skills and knowledge that he doesn't have. And, we don't all, it doesn't need to be one size fits all. And I think it also gives me that opportunity that, like, again, I said, I have a little bit of that squirrel brain where there are a lot of different things that interest me. And as I've been developing the podcast, getting to talk to a lot of different people, I'm learning, hey, maybe, this wellness modality is something I want to get a little bit more, well versed, maybe get some kind of certification so that I can pursue that as part of my business as well. And kind of how do I want to incorporate these different things, because it doesn't have to be just the one. And so it gives me a little bit of that freedom, and a lot of what I learn in my corporate America job can be, I think, because I'm in communications and a very networking related role, a lot of those skills can then be transferred to the side hustle as well, whether you decide to do it or not. And then when I'm in my day job, I can use a lot of what I'm learning about, podcasting, about social media, about marketing. And there's really that symbiotic relationship there.
I want to talk a little bit more about that, how your PR background and this professional background that you have actually helps you with your blog and your side hustle and all of that. Like, how has your PR background really helped you build this brand?
I think first and foremost, I don't think anybody could. I think everybody can benefit from being a stronger communicator, no matter how skilled we are. So I think studying communications was really great for me because I was able to bring a writing background into my job and into then the podcasting. I think before I was a public relations major, I briefly studied journalism and I worked for a local newspaper in high school, but it was paid by the newspaper. So I say that I really was a journalist. But, when I was a baby journalist, I had to learn how to talk to people and how to ask questions and really take that interest. And that benefits you in so many different areas of life, just in getting to know people and making connections with other humans in terms of friendships and relationships. But it also helps you find opportunities. It also helps, for us, we developed a genuine friendship and we're able to also promote each other in a business sense. And I think that's so cool that, if I meet someone that I think would be a good fit for your show, I've been able to connect you, or if I think somebody may need, the podcast producing, or they may need some help with how do I get onto shows? I think, I have this really great person, this really great resource out there that I've gotten to know. And because I've been not forced into, but sort of forced into networking as part of my day job and having, a lot of those communication type skills are very important to hone in public relations. That's been very beneficial then for the podcasting too, because I think, it's great if I have someone on an episode and we have a great conversation the one time, but so many of these great relationships, it compounds. We are on each other's shows. We're on each other's Instagrams. We come to each other for, advice and to help each other out. And I think when it can really grow like that, that's really where the magic happens. So that definitely has helped me. And then also, I guess, social media has changed so much. I studied social media in school and it was so cutting edge at the time. We were using Flickr for our photos and that was so exciting. I had to create a blog in class and we did a tweet chat to learn AP style. And that was so cutting edge. And now I don't even hear the term tweet chat anymore. Instagram, I think, came onto the scene right when I graduated college. And so it's one of those industries that has changed so rapidly. And if you don't, it's sort of like that speeding train. If you don't get on it while you're near the stop, you may miss it. And so with the job that I have and with the podcast and with my blog, I really have to keep current on the social media trends and what's going on. So it's beneficial to me in both sides of things. So definitely, I think the networking, the writing, and then the currency in those trends.
Totally. Relationship building is so important for so many different parts of life and business. And I think it's referred to as a soft skill, but honestly, it's so crucial to truly having your own business, right? Like
Yes.
if I was to visit Central Florida, like your blog would be the first one that I would check out. And, you'd be one of the first people that I reach out to whenever I visit. And so it's just like building these type of relationships is super important. And also, you're in an industry that is, quote unquote saturated, right? Like the travel industry,
Yeah.
the health industry, the lifestyle industry, but you've kind of claimed your own space in this part of focusing on Central Florida, focusing on, your history of dealing with autoimmune diseases and, working through that. And so, what have you done and what advice do you have for people who want to get into industries like this, but all those scary experts are like, "Oh, don't get into a saturated field." Like, what is your advice on that?
I know it can be really scary because you have, so many different, I mean, there's so many different wellness influencers out there. And some people laugh when they hear influencer for that because it is so saturated and there are so many. And it gets intimidating when a lot of the ones that I follow do have, millions of people that are tuning in. And so I always think, and I do get that imposter syndrome sometimes of like, well, what am I bringing to the table that they don't? But what I found, and this can sound so cheesy, and everybody's, you've been hearing it since you were a little kid, but to be yourself. And again, it may sound like the simplest thing, but
No, I
just
love
kind of being authentic. Yeah, like I make my dorky little jokes sometimes on the show, and really developing the relationships. I think with something I really, really try to do when I'm having those conversations on the show, and it feels like this right now, but that it's you, me, and the listener. We're sitting down for a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and just having a conversation. And so bringing that to the table, I think also where I found some differences, I really thought about where am I struggling and what need is not being met for me personally because I was sitting there thinking, what can I do to feel better? Because what I'm finding out at my doctor's office isn't really helping me. And I could go on a whole tangent about how women are not believed by their doctors and,
yes.
you know, all the struggles that we face when we have weird symptoms and all of that. And so when I'm researching, it can be really hard sometimes, and knowing what modalities to follow, not living in LA where maybe I could go to a sound bath meditation, next door or what have you, so many of the resources that are available in some of the major cities. While I do live outside of Orlando, it's we're not particularly rural. I have access to a lot of what I need, but it isn't, into some of the new age as we used to call it. And so some of the things that you hear about, some of these modalities, some of the woo woo, it's not as readily available. So then I think about people in more rural communities where they really don't necessarily have, a Whole Foods around the corner, or some of the resources that, that are being talked about on these shows. So what I like to do is really, I would listen to some of the shows and think, what even is this thing that they're talking about? Because everybody seems to know except for me. So really just demystifying it and kind of, laughing at ourselves sometimes, and kind of just enjoying the process and taking people along on my journey a little bit. And I know that in a lot of ways, I'm not the expert. The guests are truly my experts that are sharing their wisdom on the subject. And then I do have, as I've gone along, I've certainly developed a lot of that knowledge and more interest and started to take some more courses, but really just kind of taking the listener along on the journey, being authentic as much as I can, and inviting people to be vulnerable with me. And I try to share where I can, this is where I've struggled. This is where I continue to struggle. And this is what I'm doing, or this is what I've done. And these are small steps I've taken. What can I do with a full-time job and a side hustle, and at one point grad school, to live a happier, healthier life without having to do a million different things by 6 a.m. Or, when you're juggling all of the things. I have friends who are parents, and all, when we're juggling all of that, it can be so challenging to listen and hear, oh, you can just do all of these things, and, by lunchtime, you'll be feeling great. And so really breaking it down, really being myself, and just taking that time to listen to what then the listeners have to say too, and bringing that to light, I think is what kind of sets that show apart, or sets my show apart.
Do you want to start growing your business rapidly in a really fun way? Do you want to increase your visibility and profits? I have just the thing for you. My course, Great Guesting: How to Grow Your Business Through Being a Podcast Guest, is now available, and it's guaranteed to get you on podcasts. Do you want to connect with more clients, share your story, make stronger connections, and grow your audience? But do you find that you're second guessing yourself, are indecisive on a topic because you're into so many things, and thinking, is this even possible? You'll love this step-by-step guide on how to be a podcast guest. We go over 6 lessons that are knowing your story, narrowing down the topic, finding podcasts to be on, setting up your audio, preparing to record, and of course, marketing, because that's what I'm all about. Being a guest can be fun, but if you don't have a plan to go with it, you're really just spending the hour talking. You're not moving your business forward, and that's exactly what this course is designed to teach you. You can find this course on my website at Espresso Podcast Production, and I guarantee you that you will be a guest on podcasts in no time. Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. And I think, oh my gosh, whenever I look up for entrepreneurs, how to de-stress or things like that, it's like, oh, go on a quick hour walk. And I'm like, an hour walk? Oh my God.
Yeah.
And so things like that just truly make me laugh. But I think you're honestly doing incredible with your blog and podcast. And
Thank you.
honestly, I know a lot of people can be scared to jump into every single industry is saturated right now. But when we look at it like that, it's just very negative. But when we look at it from a relationship building standpoint, everyone in your industry are your connections, right?
Yeah.
If you were to travel to maybe somewhere else in Florida or somewhere else on the East Coast, there'd be a person there doing their own blog, their own podcast. And I think it's just this is what makes the whole world go round, right? All of these
Yeah.
connections that we make. And so I know a lot of people see others in their industry, I'm a podcast producer. If I looked at other podcast producers and I was like, oh, that's my competition, I would not be a happy person right now,
Yeah.
right? Instead, I look at what they're doing. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. That's not what I do, but this is my brand. This is how I present myself. And so I love that. And I think that's truly a good point there of you are what makes your podcast stand out. You're what makes your blog stand out. And so just thinking of it like that is a much healthier mindset to have.
Yeah. And I think also knowing, hey, I am not for every person, and the person with 1 million followers is not for every person. And what might resonate with a listener is going to differ by person. And so I think there's space for all of us. And then also knowing that, hey, we might have different approaches within the same niche. We can help each other. We can elevate one another. We can learn from each other. Maybe we can share, even though we don't do things the same way, we may still have some best practices that we can provide, or people we can connect each other with. Just even an example, I have coming up on about 100 episodes. So say 100 interviews, give or take. And probably 10 of those people have been Reiki practitioners. Every single one of those Reiki practitioners, very, very different conversation, very different approach to how they use Reiki in their practice, or even if they do. And that is just one very singular area of energy healing and wellness that's been explored on the show. So even when you get that, granular, it still can be so different. And I think, we've had so many episodes where we've talked about healing from trauma, where the approach is so different. And again, to kind of explore, what works for me might not work for you. This guest may have an approach that works for my listeners, and this other guest may have a different one. And so kind of recognizing that there can be space for all of that. And that, yeah, I think you're so right. You are what makes it unique too. Because you're I mean, I love your guests as well, but if it weren't for Haley Hayhurst, Employee to Boss wouldn't be what it is, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. And same with yours. Like, we're the constants in our show, right?
Yeah.
Like, if someone hates the host, they're not going to be like, oh, I hate the host, but let me go listen to the guest, right? They just find another show. And so I think that's like a really important point for people to remember, especially when they're experiencing imposter syndrome. One
Yeah.
of the things that you mentioned is you want to give tips to people who maybe are in a corporate career, have a side hustle in grad school, doing all those things. And so, that's another place where you've really claimed your space, those like quick, easy, maybe not easy, but like you have to put in the work to make the change type of systems. And so like what advice do you have to someone who's trying to balance it all?
First of all, know that I think you can have it all, but you can't have it at the same time. And that's something I struggle with, because if I could, I would stretch the day out. We'd have more hours. We'd also have more hours of sleep,
Oh yeah.
but we can't. And it's unfortunate, but we have we have finite hours. So we have to make the most of what we can. And so for me, getting hyper organized, and I hate, that I have to make it that way sometimes, but for me, having my lists, having my planner is so key. So I keep a paper planner. I love to keep it old school, and I actually make it kind of a self-care ritual. One of my guests a few years ago, she is a YouTuber with planners and paper planning. And I found it so therapeutic watching what she does. And while mine is not necessarily as beautiful as hers, I found that, just taking the time with the stickers, I found that to be just a nice form of self-care, to be kind of intentional as I'm blocking out what my week is going to look like. And I take a little bit of time on Sunday to just sit down and block out, okay, this is when I have this meeting. This is when I, may have a podcast interview, or when I need to work on something for my social media. I also keep, I do use digital tools, and I think that's important to figure out what digital tools you like and don't like. So when I get a thought, because I do have the racing mind, and I'll think of something at a weird time, instead of trying to stress over like, what was it again? I will and I hope I don't wake her up right now, but I will try to tell Siri right then to remind me of whatever the thing is. Or I may have a note, I may keep it in a note depending on what the task is, but I keep, and this may sound like overkill, but I have a checklist in my Evernote for things I want to do within the month. And it's a mix. So it includes those things like getting my library card set up and getting my ballot into the into the mail and things like that. But it also includes making sure that if I'm partnering with a brand, making sure that I get those assets in when I need to get them in, making sure that I get certain things done for different episodes. So I have things on a monthly basis, and then I do keep a weekly list too. And that's on my refrigerator. I put that up Saturday or Sunday, just kind of depending on, when the mood strikes. And it includes those nagging tasks for the week of, hey, I need to call and reschedule my dentist appointment that I've been putting off. But it also includes, make sure I email so-and-so who's going to be on the podcast next week to let them know how they can connect with me to do the interview. For example, what is the link for the interview, and sending, working on certain content, making sure that I meet certain deadlines for freelance clients. And so I do keep a weekly list, that monthly list. I have that planner just with, what the day is structured like, what it's going to look like, and then the reminders too, so that they flash on my phone and I have to do it, or else it will stay on my phone screen until I check it off.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. What are some of those tools that you love?
I really like Evernote, and I'm still trying to determine where Evernote other than I think the interface is so pretty, and I'm still trying to determine, I think that there's a lot more I can be doing with Evernote that I'm not currently, versus the Notes app. I think either one, the Notes app that came with the iPhone, I think if you like your Apple products and you like using the Notes app, keep using that, figuring out what's going to work for you. But Evernote for me, I have folders for different categories. And so some of those things are going to be business related. Some are just personal development. For example, I'm taking a Reiki class online right now. And
Oh,
so,
that's awesome.
yeah, like that's been so fun for me just to kind of develop this new modality that I'm really enjoying and find this new way to deal with my stress. And hopefully I'd like to do more with it to help others in the future. But, keeping different folders for the different things that I'm working on. So from the side hustle perspective, career perspective, for the full-time career, and then like household as well, because sometimes you're working on all of those different things and you forget, hey, I need to get almond milk. And it's as simple as that, but it's a piece of wellness that we don't think about. I am so much happier when I'm remembering to get what I need to get to the post office and do the tasks that may seem really mundane, but making sure I'm doing all of that and taking care of my household and taking care of what needs to get done to kind of do the adulting that we all dread, that we don't want to do. But making sure I'm doing that and, staying balanced in that sense. So I think writing it all down, but that Evernote is probably what I would say is my favorite. And then the reminders too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love those. Very ADHD friendly, right? I have
Yes.
ADHD. I was just
I
listening
do
to your
too.
episode of where you interviewed someone about ADHD,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what that reminded me of. Like, things that make it easy for us to keep our lives in check is so important. I'm out of coffee creamer, and I keep forgetting until something like this reminds me. I'm like, I just need to
Yes.
put this down.
So I have a note for that. I have in Evernote, I have a list of things I need pretty much next time I go to the store. So as it comes up, I'll just put it right in there so that when I'm at the store, I can pull it up. And then there's categories, and it gets so it is my ADHD for sure.
That's so smart.
But if you were to mention to me, hey, I got this really great cosmetic thing that I really love, and I'm not looking to buy it right now, but when I run out of whatever I'm using, I may want to go do that. And so I have that list too, or podcasting equipment. And it's also very helpful for, I have a birthday coming up with that wish list. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I bet your friends and family love that too.
Oh my gosh. Well, it helps me because anytime anyone would ask me what I wanted, and this kind of ties back into the side hustle and full time and, juggling it all, is when people would ask me, what do you want for your birthday or whatever? My thing was always, I don't know, can you just find a way to make my life easier?
Oh yeah.
And doing things like that, it does make my life easier, because then I am able to think like, well, actually, if I had because there are things that you want and things that you may need. And we all have these thoughts like swirling all the time. And I was able to finally say, hey, I've been saying for years, I want a new ring light. I want something that's going to be a little sturdier, a little bit better as I start to build and grow my brand. And so I put that on the wish list, and having that in my Evernote too. And just as these thoughts come up, just writing it down, brain dumping it. I think that can be so so helpful, instead of doing what I used to do, which is have a Post-it over here and another one in the other room and another list, and like papers just piled up of all the ideas I have. Instead, kind of centralizing it and using one or two tools to really keep it, keep that brain organized. Because when we're organized on that, I think then we can get more focused on, because we should be putting that time and energy into our business and into the things that bring us the joy. And instead, I think the ADHD brain, especially, we end up having to put so much of that focus into functioning and doing the everyday tasks that if we can simplify it in any way we can, all the better. Yeah.
Sure. And you said you're getting Reiki certified, correct?
Right now I'm taking a very low level intro course. So it's not Reiki 1, but I do want to, I'm already seeing that like there's a difference, even just with my Fitbit, I'll see the heart rate going down and all of that, and looking at some of the health parameters, but also just I had felt kind of a calling to do it for a while. I picked it up a long time ago and then kind of abandoned the course and decided recently I really just wanted to go back to it. That energy healing in general, even though it may sound very woo-woo, there are certain aspects where it really started to resonate with me. And so I do want to pursue that certification once I finish this, very introductory level course. So it's exciting, and learning how to tap, they combine it with emotional freedom technique, and just to kind of help us to regulate the nervous system. So again, that I can really show up for business, for my friends, for the people in my life, for the show, for listeners, all of it. So yeah, so I'm really, really excited. I'm hoping to get Reiki certified and then to be able to, share that with people as well.
That's awesome. And I'm just
Yeah.
curious, do you think it's because you've interviewed so many people on your show who talk about Reiki that you're like, oh, maybe I should do this too?
So it actually started. So it was before I started the show. There was a free course being offered through, I think, Mind Body Green. And it was during the pandemic when a lot of the resources that you would typically buy online, they were now offering online so that people could just, I think, survive a really difficult time and
Oh yeah,
keep
we
our,
needed stuff to do.
yeah, yes. And so that was the time, everybody's learning how to bake and everyone's picking up a new hobby. I was trying to propagate my succulents at one point. They did not survive that. I am so sorry to my poor, sweet little jade plant. May he rest in peace. But but that was one thing that I was starting. And unfortunately, things had kind of started to pick up again. And I like sort of lost focus, but I was taking that course and I really felt a connection to it. And as I'm doing it, I'm like, it was something I'd always just been curious about. I'd heard people talk about on other people's shows, but when I was doing it, I'm like, wow, I am so powerful. And I had never really felt that before. And I just kind of wanted to explore it more. And then as I've been doing the show, I think again, talking to people that do this work or who have experienced the work and have had, these meaningful transformations because of it, it really kind of reminded me, hey, maybe this is something I should try. Between that and then recently doing a tapping session, I've been also experiencing some TMJ and some pain in my body where I'm thinking, hey, maybe this is something, while I'm getting some of the medical treatments for certain things, maybe I should also focus on, what can I do on the spiritual, mental, psychological side, with that mind body connection, with what can I do on top of, on top of maybe getting a mouth guard, or while I'm waiting for the
Right.
mouth guard to get there, what are some other things I can do to, you know, to help myself. But also I think if these modalities can help me, I'm often with my autoimmune stuff, I always end up being like the 1% of people that has this one weird symptom happen or this one weird result on a blood test. So if it can help me, my hope is that then it can help a lot more people and that I can bring that perspective.
Mm.
Um, you know,
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I think, like you're saying, like you're taking a course, but you also listen to other podcasts, I'm assuming, on these topics. And I do the same. Whenever I want to learn about something, I go listen to a podcast about it. And I think, you have your blog and your podcast, which is awesome because those are two. I was talking about this on Instagram just the other day of long-term content where like blogs and podcast episodes, like those can be found for so long. I really think it's, people who are just promoting their business on Instagram or Facebook, they're really missing that long-term content piece because the posts I did 3 months ago, no one is going to see those. Those are so deep in my Instagram that like no one, unless they're really looking, are going to see those. And so I think
guy on Tinder.
probably, right?
Yeah.
That one guy who's just like, let's see what she's about.
Yeah.
I just think like having this podcast and this blog for your brand is like so, so important. So I know you've talked about really why you started this blog and podcast, but do you want to talk about maybe how it's helped you in places of your life that you maybe weren't expecting?
Yeah. Well, first of all, my senior year, I was working for the university's career center, and we would tell students all the time, be careful what you have on social media. Employers are going to Google you. I didn't think about that for myself, and that it could actually benefit you what they find on when they Google you. I was
Oh,
applying.
it's all so negative when they're like,
Yeah,
but that's a good point. It can be
it's
positive
like,
too.
yeah, because I wasn't posting like keg stands or anything like that. I have vertigo. I actually probably could not do a keg stand. It would be like really, I
Probably
would be
should
very disoriented. But in theory, and the partying and everybody's so concerned about what you're posting. And, you want to make sure, of course, it's something that you don't post anything you wouldn't want your grandmother to see. However, again, like I didn't realize that I figured my social media would be more of a neutral for employers, that they would see it and say, okay, she looks like a quote unquote normal human being. She's
exist.
not,
Like
and
person, right?
yeah. And I had originally started my blog under a different name, or a different blog name in freshman year of college. And so that had been around. That was 4 years of writing samples, and not the writing that you're turning in class. It's not the portfolio piece that I would share when I was applying for an internship that I'd spent weeks and weeks putting together, or that had gone through drafts, that had been through all these edits, but really these blogs that I was posting on a shorter period of time. I mean, of course, I did vet my information and put that up, but it's a lot quicker for, as far as that content goes. And I remember applying for an internship, and they actually said, hey, we Googled you. We love your blog. And they were more referring to that in terms of my writing samples than my professional writing samples that I was turning in. And then when I went to the credit union in 2013, I had applied. I was primarily in more of a marketing and business development type of role. They saw that because they Googled me, that I had a blog. And as they looked through my blog, they realized, oh, she can write. And it opened up a lot of different opportunities for me in my corporate job. And I pretty much managed the public relations for the company. And that wouldn't have been possible had the right person not seen my writing in a completely different setting, because I wasn't necessarily going to walk into their office with printouts of my blog or of writing samples that I didn't think were relevant to the position. So in that sense, it was really helpful. The podcasting too, though, we have a podcast at our company, and so I'm able to share lessons learned from what I do in my show, the connections that I've built. And it really has been so beneficial for me. I've just met so many incredible people. It builds the relationships that you had existing with other people, but you also meet a lot of new ones too. And just it's a great representation of who you are. And you're so right too, that it is this long-term form of content that, a recent review I got was referring to an episode that was maybe my 20th episode, and we're around 100 episodes at this point. And that was how they had found me. And people are going to find you in so many different ways, as long as they do and they stay hooked and they you resonate with them, they resonate with you. That's what matters, for bringing them in. And so I think that experience has all really shaped it for me and helped me to gain that visibility. And it's been really great to be able to marry what I love in my personal life with, my full-time professional, and then also using that to hopefully build something that could be sustainable long-term, and that, that I can grow into over time.
That's awesome because, regardless of who you are, what career you're in, corporate, entrepreneurial, have your own business, whatever it is, you have a personal brand, right? It's the way people perceive you. So I remember before I started my business, you would Google my name and like my high school track records would come up. Track. And I was like the slowest person. Like no one ever needs to see those.
Yeah.
So when I started creating content, writing for even internships and stuff, like those made its way down the Google search, thankfully. And so I love that because, I mean, you started this in college. What was your reason for starting it? Was it just for fun?
Just for fun. I always loved to write. I wasn't doing a ton of writing in my classes at that point because I was in the very general education type courses. Didn't know what I wanted to major in totally. And I honestly just had a lot of thoughts swirling around, and I wanted people to listen. And so I started out it was kind of shouting into the void. And they were very, very random topics. It's actually kind of funny for me and sometimes embarrassing when I see what I wrote about, but I've kept a lot of them up there. So I even have like worst boyfriends in history, referring to historical figures. And,
I want to read
I
that one.
it's a fun one. I'll have to send you the link to
Please
that.
do.
I did keep that up, and I used it as a way to kind of explore my writing style a little bit, give advice. It was therapeutic to me sometimes because I would write about a situation and I never wrote about what I was going through in that particular moment. I liked to, I always like to tell anyone I was dating, for example, like, hey, don't worry, there's not going to be a blog post about you. I'm not the Taylor Swift of blogging or anything like that, although I do love Taylor as well. But, using it to be creative, to kind of share my thoughts on different things. And then as I was also really adjusting well to being in college, I really felt like I thrived when I was there, sharing what I was learning. And so I've always really wanted to be kind of a knowledge sharer, to share ideas, to share resources in any way that I can. And so that's what I've always done with it, just in different ways. And then just being a little silly and adding the entertainment value. And I still try to, here and there. But yeah, I'd say that was really what kind of inspired me to start it.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely. And, you probably never thought it would be brought up in a job interview ever. And so
Never.
that's incredible. And I think that's what people really need to hear as young professionals, or even, I mean, it's never too late to start your blog or just do something for fun, because even if it's, one time a month, it's still one more time than you were doing. So
Exactly.
yeah, I definitely love that advice. Thank you. And so as we start to wrap up, I would love it if you could share. I ask every guest this question. If you could share 3 actionable tips for the audience to start with, that they can, make strides in their personal life, business life, entrepreneurial life, whatever it is, what do you challenge the audience to do today?
That is a great question. And I always love listening to this one with what your guests have to say. So hopefully I can live up to that a little bit. One of those I talked about was, I think, finding an organizational system that works for you. So for me, it's that Evernote, the reminders, the planner, and then having my lists. Unfortunately, it is a lot of lists. It may be more lists than you want to keep up with for you, but figure out what is going to work for you. Don't be afraid to kind of experiment with that, but find a tool that's going to work, because if your business is starting out as a side hustle, and even if it is your quote unquote only, like even if you're focused on one business at a time, you're very busy. We are all very busy and there's so much to juggle. And so being as organized as we can with our time, with time blocking that, and focusing on what we can, and allowing ourselves to still focus again on those nagging tasks that we don't really want to do, but making sure they get done. That's going to keep you relaxed, sustained. It's going to keep you from that burnout, or at least it's going to help with the burnout, I'd say, because you're not going to be letting your schedule kind of get the best of you. You're going to know what's coming up. When I don't do my planner for the week, I don't know what I'm doing. I've actually missed a meeting before because I didn't do it, even though it flashed on my phone. I'm embarrassed to say that, but it does happen. So finding your organizational system is key. The next one for me, I kind of touched on, but doing a brain dump when you have ideas, whether it's for your business, whether it's for that shopping list, whatever it is, just write it down. Take that time. I sit down, like I take time sometimes on the weekends to just sit and say, okay, what actually needs to get done? Or, I'll have the idea in the back of my head of, hey, I really need to redo my portfolio page on my website. I was saying that to myself for probably a year before I actually put it on the list and wrote down what I needed to do. And then I did it. And I think once you actually get that down on paper or in an app or wherever it needs to go, that's when you're going to see those strides and make the changes that you want to make, whether it's for your business, for your personal, for your professional, wherever you're at. And then my last one, I would say, and I know this can be hard because I'm sure that every single person listening to this, we've got a lot of overachievers, but making time for the things that light you up outside of your business and outside of the, outside of the to-dos. And that's something I struggle with this sometimes, because I can get, when I do get that hyper focus with the ADHD, it's like you want to lean into that flow state, and we absolutely need to do that, but we need to make time for the people we care about. Take those breaks. We might not be able to take the hour-long walk, especially in a time of maybe growth for your organization, but maybe take that 10-minute walk around your neighborhood. Take an Epsom salt bath. That's something that energizes me. Figure out, experiment, see what's going to make you feel a little bit better. Even if it's, journaling practice, gratitude, prayer, meditation, volunteering. It doesn't have to be hours and hours of the day, but just doing something that is going to light you up. Self-care, giving back to the community, being around the people you care about. I think that makes a huge difference, and it translates to other areas of your life, because if I show up better for myself, I'm going to show up better for clients. I'm going to show up better for the listeners and for my friends.
Those are perfect. I love those so
you.
much. Thank you so much for joining me, Valerie. Where can people connect with you?
So listeners can connect with me anywhere you get your podcasts. So wherever you're tuning into the Employee to Boss podcast, you can find Wellness and Wanderlust. And we have a new episode every Thursday. We also can be found at Wellness and Wanderlust blog on Instagram. That's probably the best way to find me. That's where I'm the most active. Wellness and Wanderlust blog on Facebook, not quite as active. And wellnessandwanderlust.net. It houses all of the episodes, blog posts. If you go back far enough, you can find the worst boyfriends in history and worst girlfriends in history too, and learn a little history lesson there. And it's a lot of fun. And so I hope you'll join me. And and you can also Valerie Moses on LinkedIn as well. I'm happy to connect with anyone that would like to have a conversation.
Perfect. I will link all of those in the show notes. This has been so fun. I just love talking to you every time I get a chance to. So thanks so much for joining me, Valerie.
Thank you. I love talking to you. This was so fun.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Employee to Boss podcast. If you made it to the end of this episode, I hope that you implement the actionable steps from this week's experts so you can get started with your business today. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the Employee to Boss podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps more than you could ever imagine. Remember, a little progress each day leads to big results. We come out with a new episode every Tuesday. To access our show notes, transcripts, and courses, please check out espressopodcastproduction.com.